So I just want to say thank you everyone for coming today. I'm excited to welcome Vincent Truong here to talk about his very interesting career. Vincent and I became connected through my day job at the USASP, the pain society that I work for. So I'm very excited to have Vincent here to tell us about his career path, and I think it's going to be very cool to hear about where he's been and why and all that sorts of things. Again, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, just post them in the chat and we will get to them. So I think the floor is yours, Vincent, to share about your career path and what you're up to.
Awesome. If you could give me just 1 second, PowerPoint decided to sort of not upload all my pictures. So real quick.
No worries, it happens.
Hope I didn't lose it.
Anyone who's just joining us, feel free to put in the chat what stage your career you are in your career and where you're joining us today.
Okay. Okay, let's run with it. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. So my name is Vincent Truong, Chief Operating Officer and co-founder of Anatomic. Thank you, Brittany, for allowing me to share the story. Like I mentioned, it's the first time I'm sort of publicly speaking about it. So I hope people can find some nuggets of hopefulness in it. But for the overview, I guess we'll start off with sort of the anatomic origin stories. I'll go through my personal background, sort of the science behind why we started Anatomic, sort of the journey of how we learned about business. And it really is about trusting your instincts. I think everyone has innate business experience. They've all been consumers. So in my opinion, don't tell the business people this, but science is the hard part. I'll also go through my journey about learning about how to sell, listening to scientists and sort of creating the data, present to them. I'll touch on fundraising. Things I won't cover is how to do a pitch, SBIR funding, and generating financials. But those are all of interest to me as well too. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions. And then we'll sort of do a House of the Dragons time jump to present day, where I'll talk about assay development, marketing, sort of the day-to-day things I'm working on. And I'll sort of take a halftime break between the two chapters, and we could do sort of a Q&A session, just because there might be questions about the business side of things. But my personal background is I was born and raised in Minneapolis, Minnesota. My parents were Vietnamese immigrants, and the first business experience I had was through the family restaurant. It was about what I learned there is about working hard. There weren't really many sick days when I was young and had a sick day. I was in the office. You can sort of see the office back there. And the other thing I learned is if you make a good product, people will line up for it, and that's what you truly need to bring the world. I've spent close to half my life at the University of Minnesota. I have a bachelor's of science from in biochemistry. I was pre-med back in the day, but did not really follow through with that. When I graduated, it was towards the tail end of the recession. The conundrum I had was, do I want to be a barista here with coffee or be a phlebotomist? I did have undergraduate lab experience. I was working in a NMR lab trying to do some protein modifications for cardiac diseases. But when I graduated, it was between the two jobs, and I chose waking up at 3:30 a.m. to do blood draws to try to see if I really wanted to be on the pre-med side of things. But the turning points sort of in my career were talking to a nurse that was a real estate investor in his part-time during his part-time, and he recommended reading the book Rich Dad Poor Dad. And in that book, it was the first time I was sort of reunited with business. It got me sort of motivated to learn more outside of sort of the biology field. So I applied for a sales position job. I failed that. In retrospect, I remember why I failed that, and we'll go through that those questions in a little bit more detail. But I was fortunate enough to get a job back at the University of Minnesota in the labs of Dr. Ann Parr and James Dutton, where I met my now co-founder Patrick. And that was really when I found a newfound passion for stem cell biology. I got to work on projects with 3D bioprinting, did some laboratory automation, and worked with really cool instruments and technologies that were outside of what I did in undergrad. So the scientific premise for the discovery was the goals of James Dutton was a stem cell biologist. He was the sort of the head of the stem cell reprogramming core. Dr. Ann Parr was a spinal cord injury researcher. And the goal was to create an autologous cell therapy for spinal cord injury. So this is based off of 2012 Nobel Prize of Dr. Shinya Yamanaka. He created what's known as a human-induced pluripotent stem cell. So you can essentially take any somatic tissue from a patient, reprogram it into an induced pluripotent stem cell, and this induced pluripotent stem cell can be propagated indefinitely. And it can also be turned into any specialized cell of the body. And so we were focused on making oligodendrocyte progenitor cells. And those cells, migrate. The idea would be you would transplant them in a spinal cord injury patient. They would migrate towards the site of injury and then remyelinate the dysmyelinated axis, and allowing patients to recover motor skills. But the standard methods were long to manufacture. So going from induced pluripotent stem cell to an OPC, it was close to 120, 180 days. And so Patrick Walsh, who was my business partner now, was tasked with, making this amenable for the clinic. And his background, he did a master's at the University of Minnesota Stem Cell Institute, and he did a couple years at Lonza, which is a CDMO, contract development and manufacturing organization. And sort of he had the idea that a lot of these long protocols, you needed to refine them for a little bit so that they could be, transferred to CGMP facilities. And so the first stage here, it takes about 5 to 11 days to get what they call neuroepithelium. And he was able to shorten that path to only 24 hours. So what was a a standard 180-day process, 28 days for neurons in general. He was able to shorten it to 7 days. And so I was on the animal side of things, also trying to transplant, come up with the animal model. And we were, on the days where we needed to inject the cells, it would always be a very difficult task. So I knew the importance of manufacturing. And so when the shortcut came up, we wanted to jump at the opportunity to try and commercialize it. And during that time, we were also transplanting some what we called ventrospinal neural progenitor cells into the spinal cord injury of rats. We're able to see integration and long axons. And that was ongoing as we were doing sort of the commercialization of the company. So when we wanted to commercialize it, we had to essentially develop a business plan. And the big question we had was, do you want to go cell therapy or research tools? Cell therapy, your cells are the product. You're actually trying to cure diseases, whereas research tools, a lot of people also use iPSC-derived neurons for drug discovery or toxicology. So to try to come up with a business plan, we both signed up for the Carlson part-time MBA program. We partook in the University of Minnesota Discovery Launchpad program. And so what that was is they paired us with sort of mentors in the business space to sort of give us advice on how to make a business plan. And that was really helpful. I would say the University of Minnesota had a lot of resources to sort of guide us as first-time founders. Another thing we did was also signed up for the MinCore NSF I-Core program. And what that does is teach you how to do customer discovery, how to go out, talk about your technology, see if it's really a fit in the market. And the next slide will detail this, but it's essentially how we sort of learned how to sell, how to, really come up with a strong, solid business foundation. And after we did, meanwhile, through all these processes, we were trying to license the technology from the University of Minnesota Office for Technology Commercialization. Patrick, James, and Anne were all inventors on the patent. And so that was under the university. And so for customer discovery and sales, in the MinCore I-Core program, they sort of start you off with the business model canvas. And it's a simplified way instead of the old school multi-pages, this is how you make a business. And what you're trying to do here is for each one of these categories, talk to key stakeholders to sort of understand your product and where you need to get it in the market. It's a pretty, I would say, intense program. You have to schedule 100 calls with not customers, but stakeholders in sort of a 5-week program. And for finding all those calls, it takes a lot of time. And so one of the other resources I found was this how to sell on YouTube. It's out of the Y Combinator program, so it's a big tech push. But he talks about prospecting, the almighty funnel, essentially, how you get prospects, how you start to have conversations with them, and then how you close and get revenue from them. And what we were focusing on was sort of the MinCore I-Core program was these first 2 steps. And the one takeaway we had is the pain space, the stem cell space, whatever research field you're in, it's relatively small. So you don't want to go around spamming everyone. You want to develop long-lasting relationships in the industry because we were hoping to be there for the long haul. And for each customer or each conversation we were trying to have, we were, making sure they were the right people and that we could really try to bring value to them. through these conversations. And for prospecting, it's totally a numbers game. You have to reach out to 10 people before 3 will respond to you, and then you'll get 1 conversation. So, you know, I wouldn't say my hit rate was 1,000 reach outs, but it was up there in the hundreds of thousands. We also got to do with travel to conferences for the first time. This is Patrick and myself at the International Stem Cell Research in 2019 conference, and that took a lot of pre-meeting planning, and it was also a lot of fun to learn how to navigate the conferences. I remember going back, looking at everyone's badge, quickly doing a Google search on their name or their company, and figuring out if they were a right fit to try to initiate a conversation. There's also a big nightlife to the conferences. After all the talks and seminars, we would go around to all the local bars and again, try to look at badges so that we could have a conversation. And there were some pretty serendipitous conversations where someone's stumbling out of the bar and you guys sort of magically are in the same space. So the reward for me was, you know, counting business cards at the end of the day, being able to sort them and by how relevant they were. Another thing we really did was a lot of LinkedIn and cold emailing. They give you sort of a script in the NSFI core program. You know, I heard I heard from a colleague that you're an expert in pain. We're in the sensory neuron space and in the NSFI core program and looking to understand the market for our tech. And, you know, to be honest, when you're asking for help, asking for advice, I think we were really fortunate to have people both in industry and academia help us out. And the best reward were waking up to responses that, you know, people were willing to talk to us. And it's not much different than what we do now for prospecting nowadays. And we'll go into that in the near future as well. But the one thing we learned for conversations was that we needed to have the prospects do the talking. And I think that's the main reason why I failed that first sales interview. The goal was to, yes, me to sort of go through the product manual and sort of come up with a way to sell him. And I just regurgitated product manual. And in retrospect, what you really want to do for sales is let your customers or prospect do more talking. What you want to do is learn from them what is missing. And in our case, sometimes people go on tangents, which become the aha moment. We would go through our data. We would try to have a conversation with them, go through the data. And for example, we were stem cell biologists that knew how to manufacture neurons. So we would go with the spiel of, you know, starting from pluripotent stem cells, you could go from our patented 24-hour primal extraderm population into HOXP4 expressing neural crest and make immature sensory neurons in 7 days. And the pain researchers out there were not stem cell biologists, and you know, they didn't really care how the sensory neurons were made. What really popped out for them is when we showed them some characterization that sodium channels, sodium channel 1.7 and 1.8, which was previously missing in a lot of iPSC-derived sensory neurons, was actually present in our population. And that was the sort of aha moment. They were also surprised to see 1.9, as that's a big sort of holy grail of the pain field to get expressed. And so to summarize, it was more of how do you, customers care about what they study, and how do you translate and communicate to them the value that you bring. Another thing you want to do is take every conversation possible. Disclaimer, this isn't our jet, but we went to a conference where one of the, we were at a cell therapy conference, and one of the guys there had previously spoken at the University of Minnesota, probably when we first started there, so 2014, and he ended up sitting right across from us. And he started out very much like us, just a Midwest company, and just ended up selling to Thermo Fisher for a big price point. So, you know, we knew his story. We shared our story a little bit, and he just said, "Hey, do you want to come tour my facility?" And so from the conference right back, we got to tour his facility, and then he flew us home. But the goal there is to, and caveat there is to take every conversation, take every opportunity, intro and phone call, and turn it into something. And again, this is not our jet. We still fly economy to all our conferences. But what we took from all the conversations, all the feedback from them, we went back into the lab and really iterated on our product. So you can sort of see our minimal viable product here in the early days, just representative of what we were trying to do. We had version 1 to make manufacturing easier. We shrunk it down, and again, these products here, the Senso DM kit, allows users who have their own stem cells to manufacture immature sensory neurons. But from all the conversation, people didn't want to do that. They just wanted some off-the-shelf cryopreserved nociceptors that they could use for their study. And so we had to get a license from a different company, IPS Academia Japan, in order to sell these real DRG nociceptors that we made. And we ended up pulling the trigger on that. And we went and we continued to sort of characterize the nociceptors. In the early days, you can sort of see our one-page product sheet. It had a picture of the product, a little bit of immunocytochemistry, images, and minimal functional data. But there is sort of a snowball effect as you continue to work on it. We now have a slide deck with about 50 slides that we have to breeze through and sort of narrow down and focus towards our customers. But it was fun in the early days to learn what was needed, implement it in the lab. And that's where I learned how to do a lot of assay development, which is still what I do day to day. And we'll detail that in some coming slides. Something else to hit on, during this time as we're iterating on our product, fundraising is a big thing for early stage companies. We were fortunate enough to get some state grants from Minnesota. So there's a Regenerative Medicine Minnesota bio business grant that we received. There's also a Launch Minnesota, a small seed grant that allows new businesses that are in deep tech to use, and they've been crucial. We've tried SBIR grants. We haven't been successful at it, but we're working that for the future. As we started to gain momentum, we also met a really amazing local angel investor. The story was pretty weirdly too, is that we received this email out of our contact page on our website, and we were wondering if it was spam, but we reached out, did a quick meeting, and they wanted to invest, and they were not an aggressive investor. Their investing philosophy matched who we were as a company, and they've been great support so far. And now, as we have been able to generate more data, a lot of the early customer discovery calls ended up being customers. What we did is continually go back to them, showing us our updates and new data. They continued to ask questions, and we just continued to do iterations. And the whole point of this is it gets easier. as you have more conversations, you hear the same questions and you can sort of anticipate it with all the data. And now as a company, besides the sensory neurons, we're trying to expand into other disease types and products such as motor neurons for ALS, and other cell types in development. But you can sort of see our progression here. We were in an incubator space, shipping some boxes, and as we moved up, we were able to get some nicer looking booths, and that's another topic for present day as well too. We were also fortunate enough to have the Stem Cell Institute have a stem cell business incubator in February 2022. So this year we moved out of the university lab space to our own facility about 5 minutes away in an old warehouse district. But you can sort of see this is today. We had a big winter storm today, but we were very happy to be able to move out. We got to furnish it. We got to experience the joys of figuring out we needed more electricity than we actually needed to. We overlooked the uneven floors, but it also gave us a lot of freedom to sort of do what we wanted and expand the team, which we'll see in a couple of other slides. But I wanted to just take a pause here to sort of see if there were any questions on sort of business startup or any things I can answer about business formation, the early startup days before I go into sort of what I do now.
There was a question in the chat. Adam asks, were there any challenges in having the new cells target the correct sites?
Oh, for the spinal cord injury studies, again, it was long story, or long-winded answer, but I think the way we were manufacturing the cells, when you have a long process for stem cell differentiation, and you're trying to direct the cells toward a specific cell type, the longer your process is, the longer it takes for the longer it allows the cells to drift. And so the cells we were transplanting, so they were more of a progenitor stage. So they could be a lot of things, up to, a lot of different neural type of cells. And so that's where I think you get a little bit of a blob here, where they're still in a proliferative stage. But I think the more terminally differentiated cells, when you transplant them and they are in the right space, getting the right use, I think they do know where to go. And this is early studies. I haven't been in the spinal cord injury field for a while, but as I'm working with motor neurons and neuromuscular junctions, keratinocytes, and sensory neurons, if you have those verified populations and you're putting them next to each other, they work as they are expected, I guess.
That's it for questions in the chat, unless anyone wants to put one in now while we're still paused. Otherwise, I think you can proceed.
All right, chapter 2. All right, so I guess present day, nothing much has really changed. The focus is still the customers, and according to this picture, we still like to make them happy, and we continually to be data driven. So the common theme that common saying we say around the lab is you can't drive without any data. So we need continually producing data to make our customers happy. And in order to do that, I like to find inspiration and see what industry trends where industry trends are going so that we can be relevant with our products. And for my sources, we're always talking to our customers and we're getting feedback. We understand what their pain points are and how we can help. So those influence what experiments need to be run. We're also going to conferences, listening to talks and posters, seeing what the academic KOLs are doing, the competition and the rest of the field are doing, and keeping our eye on them to find inspiration. There's also LinkedIn posts and Twitter posts that we follow, and also scientific publications and headlines as well too. And some of the examples I could bring to the table are, what are people in the sensory neuron space working on? And for sensory neurons, a lot of our customers are studying pain. Another hot topic is, the sex differences in pain. And with induced pluripotent stem cells, the idea is that you can get personalized medicine. You can get somatic tissue from a male donor, make sensory neurons from them, a female donor, and make sensory neurons from them, and sort of compare the two. That's an active project in the lab. For toxicology, I saw this recent article, it's not recent anymore, but Eli Lilly made a big purchase of Disarm Therapeutics, who are working on a novel SARM1 antagonist. So basically, it's this booming target for neural protection. And the idea there is now in the lab, we can do a lot of neurite outgrowth assays and sort of pre-dose with SARM1 inhibitors and then dose with some toxic compounds to see if they will protect us. So that's another active project in the lab that we work on to sort of show our customers and market our capability. And we have a standing meeting with the marketing team once a week to sort of plan out these experiments and see what data is needed so that we can generate it. So a big part of my job is to do assay development, still in the lab. For experimental design, I do a lot of crawling the protocol sections and papers, trying to connect with people in the space to see what they're doing. We also have a budget to work with, so constantly planning out experiments, making sure we have the equipment necessary and also the funds to do those projects. And one fun project I had back in the day was to do a flipper experiment. So we were plating out cells in 384 well format with a 12 head pipette, and we had 4 plates, and I just remember the grind of just changing media through 6 weeks on 4 plates and 384. So there are hardships, and it is science, right? Also, as a Minnesotan, just like being a Vikings fan, science always doesn't work the way you want it to. There's a circle of life where you get let down, you start to believe again, get your hopes up, and it cycles through. But when it does hit, it is very nice. And so we were able to get these really nice captation responses on this high throughput flipper system that we borrowed time on from the local university. And this was really nice for us because human iPSC sensory neurons in the past were missing actual capsaicin responses, which a lot of primary human DRG do. So that's related to sort of TRPV1 receptor, which is sort of spice, related to spice. And so after creating an assay, showing that our cells are useful for those assays, you sort of let that assay run free in the wild. Sometimes that pigeon comes back and you have to do a couple more iterations in the lab, but for the most part, it's really rewarding to see the customers be able to replicate what you've done. Another part of the job is setting up collaborations. Science is hard, and sometimes you don't have all the equipment. So question here is, how do you make it easier? And what I like to do is just set up collaborations with synergistic companies or academic institutions to really make sure that, hey, we have human iPSC sensory neurons. We know you are experts at doing, let's say, automated patch clamp. Do you want to collaborate? And typically, when you do make that introductory call and pitch, if there is true synergy, the collaborations go relatively quick. You do a simple material transfer agreement where either we're shipping them cells or they're shipping us an instrument, and then we just perform the experiments and gather the data. And a lot of times, they make great posters and are great marketing material. Another aspect of marketing is just disseminating data. And over the last, I'd say 6 months, we've made a big push on social media. So we've upped our LinkedIn game as well as our Twitter. We've tried Instagram as well too, but surprisingly, a lot of academics are on Twitter, and this is me maybe just being ignorant, but Instagram, I would say is not working as well. And LinkedIn is always good for the professional network. But what we're doing is, again, just taking ideas, cool images that we're producing in the lab and sharing it with, our followers. Here we have some motor neurons that we've been working on, that we did some immunocytochemistry on. We were able to get a high density microelectrode array system in-house to sort of look at our cells at the functionality of our cells on a single cell level, just more phase contrast. And then another cool experiment we were running was co-cultures of keratinocytes with our sensory neurons, because sensory neurons innervate the skin. We've been interested in learning more about sort of the cosmetic toxicology space, and did that sort of as a proof of concept. And for us, marketing generates data as well too. It's always interesting to see where our leads are coming from, making sure that we continually work towards marketing in those down those channels. And then other experiments, we do run our A/B experiments, so we'll have 2 opinions on a certain topic. We'll send message out to 30 people with one idea, 30 with the other one, and see how they respond. So it's sort of it's a different kind of experimenting, I would say. And another big experiment we ran this year was whether or not we should go to SFN and have a booth. And we decided to see what it was like to try to make a big push on marketing at a big conference. And part of that was a lot of pre-conference logistics. We had to make a budget, figure out the hotels, the flights, per diem. We had to do a lot of booth design, which was a lot of fun, and we got to bring the team together to do a lot of just brainstorming. And you could sort of see our first rendition at an earlier conference in the year. We tried to the tagline. We had a lot of people at this earlier conference come by and actually say, "What do you do?" So for our brainstorming experiment, we came up with not your average neuron. I think it was the idea there is quirky enough to get people to stop and think about it, as well as share sort of our underdog mentality. We had to think about what swag to put onto the kiosk. We had to do a lot of pre-conference BD and marketing. We set up a lot of meetings. We had to produce a lot of data so that we could make the posters. And when we actually got there, we thought about all the networking we needed to do, the dinner reservations, and also how to track the data that was generated from these opportunities. And I would say it was the conference was a success. We had 3 posters. We marketed all 3 posters through LinkedIn and Twitter, and we had a lot of traffic. And so the traffic from the posters led to the booth. We had follow-up conversations at the booth. And the idea now is what I'm working on is following up with all the inquiries from the booth, and also thinking about how we can make a better booth for next year. An idea is it was tough for us to schedule appointments with the random people coming up the booth. We could have an app that could do that for us. And now as the year winds down, following up with all these prospective customers, following up with current customers, I have to put my logistics and operations hat on and get ready for sort of the holiday season, where shipping to customers, a lot of the customers are looking to spend down budgets for the year, and so they're putting in their orders, and at the same time we have to compete with all the holiday shipping. And part of that job is really being able to talk to FedEx, keep an eye on the weather, and I have a really great operations manager that we coordinate with. So the last point is we're also trying to build a great company culture. There's a lot of ways to do business and science. I would say we went from 2 to 8 people in the last probably 8 months or so. So as a first-time founder, trying to figure out management, and what I'm learning is communication is key. We still want to keep up the culture of being data-driven, really loving the science. We want to stay humble at the same time, with the idea of not your average neuron. And then we want to keep the company mission in mind as well too. So we named ourselves Anatomic because we could essentially make neurons quickly, but a lot of companies focus on cell type A, cell type B. What we really want to do is really we think of cells as sort of Lego pieces, and as we unlock more cells from induced pluripotent stem cells, we want to be able to make human anatomy, big tissue structures that if you ever watch sort of the sci-fi flicks, really can do. So as a company and a long-term goal, that's what we're working towards. And as we work towards that goal, we just want to continually learn. So just wanted to give a couple of acknowledgements out. Co-founder, CEO, mentor, and friend, Patrick Walsh. He's one of the smartest guys I know. We came out of the University of Minnesota. So Dr. James Dutton and Ann Parr, MinCore program with Carla Pavone, the whole Discovery Launchpad crew, and the OTC office. I want to also thank our growing team. We got Hugh, who's our operations manager, Caitlin, Milan, and Grace, who are doing a lot of the R&D, cell manufacturing. And then also sort of the Regenerative Medicine Minnesota, Launch Minnesota grants that allowed us to get where we are today. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Excellent. Thank you so much. The floor is open for anyone to ask questions. You're free to unmute, or you can write into the chat and I will read aloud. But to start, Vincent, how cool. I mean, I know you just went through your whole story, but I'm just wondering, as someone who's just like, excited about this opportunity, what would you say really was the moment where you're like, I'm going to start my own business?
I would say, I guess this wasn't our first startup. Patrick and I, we were always the first day we met, we were always talking about business, stocks, and we also had this idea to make a cell therapy box where you would input blood and output come a cell therapy product. But we pitched that to IndieBio, which is sort of like a Y Combinator accelerator for biotech. And they really drove us to say, what's your minimal viable product? Show me a proof of concept that this actually works. And so we're not engineers. That initial product would likely take years of engineering. So we went back to the lab and stuck to what we really did know, which was stem cell biology. And Patrick is, one of the greatest thinkers. And in the lab, he kept on working on, making cell manufacturing, neuron manufacturing shorter. And we knew how big of a problem it was in the field. And so when he came up with it, showed the proof of concept data, we decided to run with it and knew that was the moment to sort of go for it. And going for it did take a year. We had to, get some formal business education, learn how to do a little bit of accounting, and then again, just a lot of help from a lot of resources around the U. And it took about a year to do a lot of business plan development. But the moment we started was when we got that grant from the state of Minnesota. We dropped out of the part-time MBA program, and we have, half an MBA each, which equals one MBA. So.
And so as you were getting started and your feet wet, were you still working full time? Was this something you were just doing on the side and then eventually were full time?
Yeah, so a lot of the sort of grant writing for the state grants was, in the after hours. A lot of the business homework that our mentors gave us was after hours, and then the moment we went full time was when we got that grant.
Do you think it was? No, so you started your MBA and you got at a certain point, and you left. You explain, like it could seem counterintuitive, like that it was supposed to help, but maybe you didn't feel like you needed to complete it.
Oh, yeah. So basically, we were juggling, the day job, the part-time MBA program, and as well as sort of the business plan generation of the idea of the company. And so a lot of what we were learning in the part-time MBA programming, we were literally applying right there to the business plan generation. And at one point, after a couple classes, it just got repetitive, speaking with a lot of the business people. And so just decided to put the MBA program on hold and I guess learn by the school of hard knocks. So.
Anyone else from the audience have questions? Well, I like to also ask speakers to, what is a bit of advice you would give yourself, knowing what you know now, for anyone who would be interested in pursuing a route similar to yours?
I would say, again, I don't want to sort of bash, not bash anyone, but a lot of the business advice we were getting in the early days, they told us to simplify in making a pitch. They wanted us to simplify the science, right? I would say, never let business overtake the science. Trust your instincts. But really, if you're gathering the data that your customers need, that is all you really need to do to sell it in a way. The business side of things, you can learn from comparables. You can get advice from people that have done it before. And a lot of people are willing to provide that advice. A lot of times for free. It's just sort of giving back to the community. So long-winded answer of trust your scientific instincts is my thing. Make sure what you're developing is actually a real need, and what you need to do is just talk to people. Don't be afraid to not talk about your invention. It takes a long time from your invention to commercialization, and so that's my advice.
And you had mentors that helped you along the way in this process?
Yeah, we had informal mentors, formal mentors, just friends you meet around the conference circuit because you're in the similar space that you just continue to talk to people. One-off conversations. Every conversation for us is a nugget. How do you take out something you've been struggling or thinking about, and all it takes is just one conversation, one sentence. So that's my piece of advice.
Awesome. Well, unless anyone else has something to say, I think we probably can wrap up and everyone can gain 6 minutes or 5 minutes back from the hour. Vincent, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming and talking about your journey today. And I hope other people also feel like they might have taken something away from where you've been and where you're going. And it's so cool to hear people like yourself that have a drive and a passion, and they develop something like this. And look at you. I love the trajectory of your photos to show your growth. I mean, that's amazing. And congratulations to you and your team. That is quite the feat. And I hope you feel proud.
Awesome. Thank you. Just anyone, feel free to reach out if you ever want any advice. That's sort of what helped me. So yeah, I'm open.
Cool.